Francis, is it son? Yes. Francis works for an amazing organization, United We Dream. As she said, just works so hard in trying to pass comprehensive immigration reform. A lot of people are frustrated on all sides of the debate that there's not yet been CIR is what we call it, that it's not yet passed. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that frustration leads to at the statewide level. So in Texas specifically, it's been interesting because I observed kind of as an outsider in the 2011 legislative session here in Texas, and I couldn't believe how anti-immigrant, how much of a sentiment there was, anti-immigrant sentiment there was during the 2011 session. There were over 80 bills filed that targeted the immigrant community, and this comes out of a frustration, out of a fear of the unknown, out of a lot of different sentiments. But the way that you see it manifest here in Texas is quite remarkable, because you see that the state government is trying to target these vulnerable immigrant communities through this legislation. And so that's kind of what the feeling was in 2011. All these bills passed, all these bills filed, largely blocked. And then you come to the 2013 session that just recently ended, and you just see this huge shift in momentum. Not to say that there weren't any similar bills, but this last session was just so different, just a change in tune. And so you see there wasn't a lot of successful, what I would say are pro-immigrant bills, but just that shift on momentum is a huge deal. And so why is this happening? Well, one, because you have advocates, like Frances and her organization, but you're also seeing the debate at the national level change, right? You saw the last election, how the Latino vote, the immigrant voices were amplified in that last election, and so you're now seeing somewhat shift in the dialogue, and that's reflected in the legislative session. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw in Texas, because it's good to know what's going on at the statewide level. But before I do that, before I paint this rosy picture, this completely rosy picture in Texas of what the last legislative session looked like, because there was a couple of good bills passed. So one example. Now, when a person who's accused of a crime has to sign a statement, you actually have to know what language, you have to be able to read and understand the language of the statement that you're signing. So that became law. Not a very radical change, something that you might ask, well, isn't that the law already? No, it's not. No, it wasn't, and now it is. So you see that very small shift in small gain, but a huge shift from this blitzkrieg of what we saw last session. So before I talk about what are we looking forward to for this next go-around, one of the things that's been, that affects students like Mario, that Frances mentioned, and affects people in my own family and probably in some of your families, is whether or not, if you're a dreamer, whether or not you have access to in-state tuition to go to college. And so this is a law. Texas and California were the first states back in 2001 to pass a law saying, these students like Mario, who's been here since he was 5 years old and gone through the school system, graduated from a Texas high school, they should not be treated as though that they're international students and having to pay either out-of-state or international tuition. And so this law granted them and made college a reality for a lot of these students. And so that's been the law now for almost a dozen years. And so now, and this is why elections are so important. So, MALDEF, where I work, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, we are a nonpartisan organization. But that's not to say that we shouldn't be paying attention to who are the candidates running, what are they saying, And that's something that everybody here can do. So when we're talking about an issue like in-state tuition that's so important and integral to the Dreamer community, we're seeing now that 4 of the 5 candidates for the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas, and that position is very powerful. They run the Texas Senate. They're now kind of outdoing each other to say who's gonna be able to repeal this in-state tuition law, so that now these Dreamers will no longer have access to affordable path to college. And so, you know, it's on us to pay attention to those kind of things, and when we look at who's running to run our state. And so I don't want to paint this rosy picture when there's still some very real anti-immigrant sentiment here within our state. But I do want to look ahead to and talk about what's going on for next session. In the next legislative session, which starts in January 2015, one of the biggest issues that was debated this past year, but that's going to come back, it didn't pass, but it gained a lot of momentum, is a bill that again affects a lot of Dreamers, just like Mario, and that's being able to have a driver's license if you're an undocumented person. So Mario might never have been stopped and gotten into the immigration system had he been able to show that he had a right to drive, either a driver's license or a driver's permit. Right now in Texas, Dreamers do not have access. Dreamers or undocumented individuals do not have access to a driver's license, and so you're seeing a community that's living in the shadows, that can't even go to school or to work without fear that they're going to get stopped and pulled over. And perhaps taken into custody. And so this is a huge issue. It's a civil rights issue. And one of the things that MALDEF and many other organizations in Texas are going to be fighting for in 2015, and we hope you'll add your voice to this debate in the legislature. It kind of seems like a scary place to come and speak before, you know, sometimes the legislators are up here and they're sitting and looking down at you, but you know what we saw from this last session, that look what happens. Look at the momentum and the change that can happen when you flood the Capitol on whatever issue it may be. And so this is an issue that's a priority for you know, the immigrant rights community and the Dreamer community. To have access to these driver's license or permits, and so we're going to be pushing really hard. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this issue is that you have a lot of strange bedfellows come around on this issue. So you have insurance companies who want folks to have a license and have to pay insurance because they're going to be banking. So you have insurance companies, you have a business community, and you have both Republican and Democratic support for this. And so there's a very real possibility that this issue can gain some traction. And so, you know, definitely keep an eye out for that issue. California actually just passed this year a similar bill, and so. Usually we say, you know, whatever Texas does, as Texas goes, so does the nation. But in this case, let's see if we can do what California did. Another bill that I think is really important and it impacts the immigrant community is we call it, you know, protect and serve, not deport, and that's talking about law enforcement. Right now, you know, Anne can talk more about how this impacts everyday lives. But what happened right now is you can be a victim of a crime in a community, but not be afraid because of your immigration status to report that crime. And so one of the laws that I think will have a good chance of passing this next session is a law that says that police officers cannot ask the immigration status of a victim or a witness of a crime, because what happens is that there's an intimidation factor. You want to be a good citizen and report a crime, but you don't want to be taken into custody because of that. And so there's a real fear when you have police officers acting as immigration officials. And so that's something else to look out for. And then the last thing that I'll leave you with is just, you know, everybody here can be eyes and ears in your own community. And so one of the things that we've been seeing lately is that this whole issue of, again, law enforcement acting as immigration officials and providing that intimidation factor. We saw that recently in the Rio Grande Valley, but we've also heard rumors that it's been popping up in different parts of the state. And that's the Department of Public Safety having checkpoints and asking about immigration status under the guise of checking for driver's license and checking for insurance. And so if anybody sees that happening, please call MALDEF or other immigrant rights groups. So just be those ears and eyes on the ground, and don't be afraid to get involved. The legislature is not as scary as it seems. It's kind of a zoo sometimes, so it's a lot of fun. Thank you.